They ignored him. The aging K9 lying beside a forgotten grave, too tired to bark and too loyal to walk away.
Get 'em, boy. Catch the
Just a
flowers.
stray, they said, laughing as they splashed cold water over his head on Memorial Day. But they had no idea who would step forward next. A 12-year-old girl with more courage than all three of them combined, and a family whose lives were about to be changed forever. Because that night, when danger crept silently into their home, the useless old dog did something no one expected. He saved them. Keep watching, because what Rust did next would turn an entire town upside down and remind the world that miracles often arrive on 4 tired paws. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of loyalty, courage, and hope. Your support truly means the world. The morning fog drifted low over the Oregon Veterans Cemetery, soft and pale like breath caught between worlds. It wrapped itself around the rows of white marble headstones, carrying with it the muted fragrance of damp grass and old pine. Flags fluttered in the gentle wind, small, bright patches of red, white, and blue that seemed too cheerful for the quiet grief beneath them. Memorial Day had brought families, veterans, widows, children, and one old German shepherd who no longer belonged anywhere except here, beside a grave no one else visited. Rust lay stretched across the cool earth, his body curled protectively around the base of a weathered headstone marked Staff Sergeant Michael Rowan, Search and Rescue Division. Rust was 10 years old, his once black coat now mottled with the silver of age. His ears, once sharp and alert, drooped slightly, and his amber eyes held the distant haze of a soldier who had survived more than he understood. His left hind leg dragged faintly when he walked, a lingering injury from a collapsed mountain tunnel during his last mission. He still carried himself with dignity, but every movement was slow, deliberate, and burdened. Anyone passing might assume he was just an abandoned stray, but Rust had not come here because he was lost. He came because he remembered. At the edge of the cemetery path, 3 teenage boys approached, Aiden, Mark, and Trevor. Aiden, tall and wiry with a mop of blonde hair and a jawline that hadn't yet decided to become manhood, led the group. He carried himself with a swagger meant to mask insecurity, the type that grows in boys who never learned softer ways to be seen. Mark was shorter, bulky, with restless eyes that darted around as if searching for trouble before trouble found him. Trevor, the smallest, with freckles and a nervous twitch to his smile, followed the other 2 like a shadow too frightened to detach. "Dude, look," Aiden said, lifting his phone to film. "Stray mutt, guarding a grave. How patriotic." They snickered as they stepped over wreaths and bouquets left by grieving families. Rust lifted his head, ears twitching at the disrespect. The softness in his eyes tightened, an instinct old as breath. He rose slowly, bones creaking, and let out a sharp warning bark. Aiden laughed. "Oh, scary. Grandpa Dog's upset." Rust barked again, sharper this time, placing himself between the boys and the grave. His tail stayed low, but his stance was firm. Beneath the age and aches, fragments of a trained K9 flickered back to life. Mark picked up a discarded plastic water bottle. "Bet he shuts up if he's cold." Before Rust could move, the icy splash hit his face, running down his muzzle and soaking the gray fur on his chest. He blinked, shivered, then simply lowered his head, standing guard over the grave instead of retreating. There was no anger in him, only duty. That was the difference between a soldier and a bully. A soldier stands because it is right. A bully stands because someone is watching. A voice cut through the cruelty. "Stop!" The boys turned to see Lily Simmons, a 12-year-old girl with chestnut braids and earnest hazel eyes. Lily was small for her age, with a soft, round face and freckles that dotted her cheeks like constellations. She wore a blue denim jacket too big for her, sleeves rolled up twice, and held a bouquet of white lilies against her chest. Despite her size, Lily's expression held a bravery that flickered defiantly. She stepped toward Rust, placing herself between him and the boys. Her voice wavered, but her stance was unshakable. "What is wrong with you? It's Memorial Day. People come here to remember, not destroy." Aiden scoffed. "Relax. It's just a dog." "No," Lily said, kneeling beside Rust as she gently wiped the water from his fur with the sleeve of her jacket. "He's not just anything." Rust's eyes lifted to her. For a brief, trembling heartbeat, something old and heavy inside him shifted. Recognition? Hope? Or simply yearning for a kind touch after months of silence? "He's doing the right thing," Lily whispered to him, "and you're brave for it." The boys exchanged glances, embarrassment prickling under the weight of her courage. Trevor tugged Mark's sleeve, murmuring something about leaving. Aiden rolled his eyes but finally turned away with a muttered insult. Their footsteps faded down the gravel path. Lily stayed a moment longer, stroking Rust's head. His breathing steadied under her touch, and for the first time in a long while his tail moved. Just a small twitch, but it was enough. When Lily stood and began walking back toward the exit path, Rust watched her. The cemetery breeze rustled the grass, lifting familiar scents. Flowers, stone, remembrance. And now, something new. Something warm. Lily glanced back once, meeting Rust's eyes with a small smile before turning forward again. Rust hesitated, looked toward his master's grave one last time, then rose on tired legs and began to follow her. It was not abandonment. It was continuation. A soldier never leaves the living behind. Rust stepped out of the cemetery gates after Lily, quietly, steadily, toward a life waiting to unfold. The evening sky over northern Oregon dimmed into a soft gradient of violet and ember as Lily guided Rust along the gravel path toward her family's small, single-story house. The home sat at the edge of a wooded stretch, its paint faded by years of rain and winter frost, its porch light flickering weakly as if unsure whether to welcome guests or warn them away. Rust moved slowly beside her, paws silent but steady, his breath forming faint clouds in the cooling air. Though tired from the long walk, he kept a vigilant posture, head low, ears rotating at every sound, the trained remnants of a life he had once lived with unwavering purpose. Lily pushed the front door open, and the warm scent of stew drifted out. Inside, the house felt cramped but lived in, filled with quilts, worn furniture, and photographs of a family that seemed happier years ago. Sitting in the armchair nearest the doorway was Harris Simmons, Lily's grandfather. Harris was a man shaped by war and the silence that followed it, broad shoulders beginning to stoop, gray beard thick and unkempt, eyes a pale blue clouded by years of sleepless nights. He had served as an army medic and carried the invisible shrapnel of trauma in every breath. His right hand trembled slightly, a tremor that worsened with stress. The moment Rust crossed the threshold, Harris stiffened, his jaw locking into a hard line. "Lily," he said, voice rough and sandpaper deep, "why is there a dog in my house?" "He's not just any dog, Grandpa," Lily replied gently. "He was alone at the cemetery. Someone was hurting him. He needed help." Harris pressed both palms onto the arms of his chair as if grounding himself. "We've talked about this. With Ben here, with everything going on, we can't just bring animals inside. It's too much." His tone was clipped but carried the exhaustion of a man whose limits had been tested too many times. Standing half-hidden behind the doorway was Ben, Lily's 7-year-old brother. Ben had dark curls that fell into his eyes and a small, slight frame. He often moved with skittish motions, as if the world was louder and sharper for him than for others. His gaze slid quickly from Rust to the floor, and his hands fluttered before he pressed them into the hem of his shirt, one of his calming habits. "He won't stay long," Lily promised. "Just tonight. We'll take him to the rescue center tomorrow." A thin crack trembled in her voice, but she held her ground. Harris exhaled heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. "One night," he muttered, "but he sleeps in the kitchen, and no noise. Ben needs routine." Lily nodded gratefully. Rust lowered himself to the floor, head resting between his paws. He watched the family with silent curiosity, sensing tension the way animals do, reading it through posture, movement, and scent. Later that night, the house settled into quiet. The distant hum of the refrigerator mixed with the soft ticking of the hallway clock. In the dim kitchen light, Rust curled beneath the table, exhausted but alert. The old linoleum was cold beneath him, but he accepted it without complaint. Hours passed. Then something shifted. Rust's ears flicked upward, his nostrils flared. He lifted his head sharply, muscles tightening beneath his aging coat. There was a scent, faint, metallic, wrong. His pupils widened as instinct overtook weariness. He rose quickly, claws clicking against the floor, and moved toward the stove. The odor thickened. Gas. His breath hitched. Trained memory surged through him like a command. Rust barked once, short, sharp, precise. Then again, and again. The pattern echoed from a time when such warnings saved human lives in collapsed buildings and wildfire evacuations. His tail stiffened, body poised in alarm. He scratched fiercely at the cabinet near the gas line, his growl vibrating with urgency. Down the hall, Harris jolted awake, heart racing. The repetitive barking stabbed through his sleep, yanking him back into instinctive alertness shaped by years in war zones. He stumbled toward the kitchen, clutching the doorway as Rust continued clawing at the floor. "What on earth?" Harris muttered, but the sentence cut short. The smell hit him, strong, dangerous. His eyes widened, breath catching. God, the line's leaking. He moved fast, despite the stiffness in his joints, twisting the main valve shut. Cold sweat formed along his temples. One spark, one misplaced breath, could have destroyed them all. Rust backed away but kept his body angled protectively toward Harris, tail low but steady. Lily appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes widened. "Grandpa, what happened?" "Gas leak," Harris said, voice shaky. "A bad one. Another hour and—" He didn't finish. Ben stood behind Lily, trembling but staring straight at Rust. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward and placed a small hand on the dog's back. Rust held perfectly still, not wanting to break the fragile courage in the gesture. Harris watched, something fragile cracking behind his stern facade. He saw his grandson, usually terrified of touch, lean his cheek against Rust's shoulder. He saw safety where chaos might have been. Silence pulled at him, heavy but softening. He warned us," Harris murmured. Rust blinked up at him with calm, steady eyes, the eyes of a creature who had saved strangers long before stepping into this household. Harris rubbed a hand over his beard, guilt and gratitude wrestling inside him. "Maybe," he said, voice low, "maybe he stays, just until we figure this out." It was not acceptance, but it was the first step through a long closed door. Rust lowered his head into Ben's small hands, breathing slowly, letting the child match his rhythm. In that kitchen, heavy with the fading scent of danger, the first threads of healing quietly took their place. The afternoon sun hung low behind the tall fir trees that bordered the Simmons' backyard, turning the sky into a wash of pale gold and soft blue. The air carried a gentle warmth, the kind that promised summer was finally pushing through the stubborn cold of Oregon's spring. Lily sat on the back steps finishing her homework, occasionally glancing up as Rust padded across the yard with quiet purpose. He sniffed the grass, the wind, the faint trail Ben had left earlier. Rust always watched Ben in that patient, measured way only a seasoned K9 could, never intruding, but never letting the boy drift beyond his awareness. Ben wandered near the tree line, his small form half hidden behind the shadows. Today, he wore his favorite yellow shirt with a faded dinosaur print, the collar slightly stretched from nervous tugging. His curls bounced as he moved, but his steps were hurried, uneven. He was murmuring softly under his breath, repeating fragments of shapes and colors, his way of soothing himself when overstimulated. Lily glanced up again and felt a flicker of unease. "Ben? Stay close to the house, okay?" she called. Ben didn't answer. He rarely did. He simply continued walking, slipping past the tree line toward the narrow path that led to the lake, a place Lily knew could be dangerous. The lake's calm surface always hid deep pockets and sudden drops. Rust raised his head, ears tilting sharply in Ben's direction. Inside the house, Harris was fixing an old cabinet hinge, his large hands steadying the metal despite his lingering tremor. He paused when he heard Rust's low rumble, a sound halfway between curiosity and concern. Then everything happened at once. A sharp splash cut through the quiet. Rust's body stiffened, and in the next breath he lunged forward, sprinting toward the trees with surprising strength for his age. Lily bolted upright, fear swallowing her voice. "Ben!" Rust tore through underbrush and down the slope toward the lake. Ben had slipped on the moss-covered bank, his small frame plunged into the dark water. The lake looked still from afar, but its depth was deceptive. Ben flailed, his limbs uncoordinated, mouth opening in a silent cry before water swallowed him again. Rust leapt from the bank in one swift motion, hitting the water with a powerful splash. His training surged through worn muscles like muscle memory awakened. No hesitation, no confusion, only purpose. He paddled in strong, urgent strokes, head low, eyes locked onto the point where Ben fought against the water. He reached the boy in seconds. Rust dipped beneath the surface, grabbed Ben's collar gently but firmly between his teeth, and kicked backward. His legs churned against the drag of Ben's soaked clothing. He maneuvered them toward the shallow edge, each movement fueled by instinct carved from years of service and rescue. When Rust's paws scraped the lake bed, he pulled Ben onto the muddy bank and barked 3 short rhythmic barks, the exact code used in his old unit to signal a found survivor. His chest heaved, water dripping from his fur in long streams, but his eyes stayed focused on Ben as the child gasped and coughed. Lily and Harris burst through the trees moments later. Lily fell to her knees beside her brother, hands trembling. Harris froze, fear and shock stripping away every wall he'd built around his emotions. Ben. Oh, God. Ben clung to Rust, fingers gripping the soaked fur along the dog's shoulder. His body shook, but he was not screaming. His breaths came fast but steady, his cheek pressed against Rust with a desperate, instinctive trust that stunned Harris more than the near accident. Within an hour, Dr. Elena Marquez arrived at the house. Elena was a woman in her late 30s with warm olive skin, dark, wavy hair pinned loosely at the back of her head, and glasses that slid down the bridge of her nose whenever she focused too intensely. She was tall and graceful, with a calm presence shaped from years of working with children who saw the world differently. Her voice was soothing, deliberate, and her brown eyes held a softness that encouraged openness even in the most withdrawn children. She stepped into the living room, her expression shifting the moment she saw Ben curled next to Rust on the worn sofa. The boy's fingers traced the outline of Rust's ear in repetitive, gentle motions, something he never tolerated with people. "What happened?" Elena asked, kneeling beside them. Lily explained breathlessly. Harris filled in the details, his voice strained. Elena observed quietly. Then she spoke softly, more to herself than anyone else. "This is remarkable. He's making eye contact with Rust." She leaned closer, studying Ben's posture, his breathing, his calmness. "His stress signals are low. This is the most relaxed I've seen him in months." Ben murmured a soft sound, barely a word. Then he whispered it again, more clearly, eyes fixed on Rust. "Rust." Harris's breath caught. Lily covered her mouth. Elena sat back slowly, overwhelmed. "He spoke." After all these weeks, he spoke. Rust lifted his head, gently nudging Ben's hand as if acknowledging the moment. Harris felt something fragile loosen inside him, a tightness around his ribs that had been there for years. Elena looked at Harris, her expression firm with certainty. This dog isn't just helping him, he's unlocking something. This is a breakthrough. Rust, still damp, rested his head in Ben's lap. The child leaned against him, small fingers tangled in gray fur, and Harris, watching the two of them breathe in quiet harmony, realized that the dog he once feared might just be the very thing saving his family. Night settled over the small Oregon town in a velvet hush, broken only by the slow toll of the church bell announcing the start of the Sunday community gathering. The old St. Gideon's Chapel, built of aging cedar and hand-cut stone, glowed warmly against the darkening sky. Strings of lanterns hung along the walkway, their amber light reflecting in the puddles left by a brief evening drizzle. Families arrived in steady waves, farmers with calloused hands, elderly couples wrapped in thick coats, children clinging to their parents with the buzzing anticipation of a night out. Lily walked beside Rust, who wore a simple makeshift bandana Lily had tied around his neck as if he were part of the family. His gait still carried the stiffness of age, but his ears lifted at every sound. Ben held on to Lily's sleeve, his steps small and deliberate. Tonight was one of his good days, as Elena called them, days where his anxiety sat quietly rather than pressing like a weight on his chest. Harris followed a step behind, tall and broad-shouldered despite his age, his gray beard trimmed neatly for the occasion. There was a rare steadiness in him, from sleeping better, from the slow unraveling of dread he had carried for years. Inside the chapel, benches filled quickly. The air smelled of polished wood, old hymn books, and the faint sweetness of melting wax from metal sconces mounted along the walls. At the rear aisle, adjusting a compact camera on a stabilizer, stood Jonah Miller, a travel vlogger in his late 20s. Jonah had a lean athletic build, sun-browned skin, and sandy brown curls that fell messily around a face framed with stubble. His hazel eyes held a restless curiosity and warmth, traits shaped from years of drifting between towns, collecting stories of small communities and their hidden beauty. He wore a worn denim jacket and carried a gentle friendliness that made strangers comfortable around him. Jonah had stopped in town only for the night, hoping to film the vintage church before moving on at dawn. When he noticed Rust enter, he pointed his camera toward the dog with mild amusement. "Well, hey there, old soldier," he murmured. The service had barely begun when a faint pop echoed through the rafters, so soft it blended with the murmurs of the congregation. Rust snapped his head up immediately. His ears pricked, nostrils flaring as he inhaled sharply. Something chemical, something dangerous, rippled through the air. Another pop, then a crack, and suddenly a burst of sparks shot down from the old wiring hidden behind the wooden beams. A small flame blossomed like a wicked flower. Within seconds, smoke spilled across the ceiling, gray tendrils thickening as it spread. People gasped, stood, shouted. Panic rippled through the chapel. Parents grabbed children. Elderly couples struggled to their feet. The exit became a choke point as fear flooded the room. Rust barked sharply, once, twice, then let out a fast triple bark. 2 to 1. The search and rescue signal he had used long ago to mark the presence of a trapped survivor. His body lowered into a ready stance, eyes locked onto the far corner where smoke swirled darkest. "Rust!" Lily called out, but Rust ignored her, purpose overtaking obedience. He sprinted toward the choir room at the side of the chapel. Jonah, instinct kicking in, followed with his camera rolling. Harris, stunned, felt his heartbeat hammer as he watched the dog become something else, something fierce, trained, unstoppable. Inside the choir room, smoke had grown thick. 3 children huddled near the piano, coughing. Rust darted in, nudging them with his nose and barking in short, urgent bursts. They moved, stumbling, following him like a beacon through the haze. He herded them toward the doorway where Lily and Harris helped pull them out. The fire spread with frightening speed. A section of old drapery ignited, sending a pillar of flame upward. The roof groaned overhead. Rust raced deeper into the building, nose close to the ground. He stopped abruptly near a collapsed pew. Beneath the fallen wood lay Mrs. Alderman, a white-haired woman in her 70s with a frail, bird-like frame. She clutched her ankle, face pale with pain. Rust scratched at the pew with frantic energy. His claws scraped loudly, drawing Harris's attention. Harris rushed to the spot, pulling aside the broken wood and lifting the trembling woman into his arms. He carried her out with Lily supporting her other side. But Rust wasn't finished. He bolted toward the far aisle where smoke swirled thicker than anywhere else. Jonah followed at a distance, filming but also scanning in fear. Rust circled a spot near a pillar, tail rigid. Then he began spinning in a tight loop, an unmistakable sign from his training indicating an unconscious person nearby. Jonah knelt and found a teenage boy slumped behind a fallen hymnal shelf. The boy was limp, soot-streaked, and barely breathing. Jonah shouted for help, dragging him out while Rust barked overhead in a piercing, urgent cry. The cry suddenly shifted, long, rising, echoing through the collapsing beams. It was the K9 warning signal for structural failure. The roof was about to give. "Everyone out!" Jonah screamed. Firefighters arriving at the scene saw Rust standing at the threshold, barking in rhythmic bursts, signaling directions. They followed him inside for a final sweep, guided entirely by his instincts. Left, right, pause, circle, bark, every movement precise, every signal life-saving. Moments after the last firefighter cleared the doorway, the roof collapsed inward in a roaring storm of sparks and flame. Outside, the townspeople watched in horror and relief as Rust stood near the fire truck, panting, coat singed in patches but eyes steady. Jonah lowered his camera slowly, breath shaking. "You're incredible," he whispered to Rust, filming the dog one last time as embers drifted like ashes of a battlefield. Rust simply sat, chest rising and falling, watching the burning church with the calm of a soldier who had returned to duty one final time. The weeks following the fire unfolded with a strange, quiet warmth, as if the entire town had begun breathing a little deeper after surviving something that might have broken them. Morning mist still clung to the Oregon pines, but the air felt lighter, softened by gratitude and stories retold at every diner, barbershop, and church pew. Almost every conversation circled back to the same subject: the old German shepherd who had walked through fire. Rust's heroic moment, captured in Jonah Miller's trembling handheld footage, spread online faster than anyone expected. The video, raw, smoky, lit by flames and Rust's silhouette, showed him guiding firefighters, barking warnings and pulling children toward safety. Jonah's voiceover, earnest and shaking, said everything. This dog isn't just brave. He's trained. He's a soldier. The clip racked up millions of views in days. Local news came first, then state channels, then national outlets. News cars lined the Simmons Street, leaving tire prints on the gravel. Reporters arrived with microphones, some polished and sleek like anchors from Portland, others local and familiar, wearing windbreakers and carrying notebook pads. They all wanted to see Rust. Ben handled it surprisingly well. The boy, usually overwhelmed by noise, clung to Rust during interviews. With his fingers tangled in the dog's thick ruff, his breathing stayed steady. He even whispered answers to Lily, who repeated them aloud for the camera crews. Dr. Elena noted the change with amazement. Ben's progress had leapt forward again. As for Harris, changes came more quietly. Sleep came easier. The trembling in his hands faded slightly. His nightmares, those dark storms that once woke him drenched in sweat, arrived less frequently, dissolving faster when Rust nudged him awake with a warm, insistent nose. Harris began taking evening walks with Lily and Ben, Rust padding beside them. His face, once heavy with old battles, softened in the corners. The whole town felt the shift. On the third Sunday after the fire, St. Gideon's hosted a special ceremony in its temporary outdoor pavilion. The burnt remains of the chapel sat roped off nearby, a blackened skeleton wrapped in ribbons of caution tape. A crowd gathered wearing coats against the cool breeze, clutching candles, banners, and homemade signs that read, "Thank you, Rust, our fire guardian, town hero." Rust sat beside Lily on the front row, bandana freshly washed, fur brushed to a soft sheen. His posture was dignified, tail curled around his paws, amber eyes calm and observant. When someone approached to pet him, he tolerated it with quiet grace, but his gaze always drifted back to his family. During the ceremony, Jonah Miller stood at the podium looking unexpectedly nervous. He wore a clean plaid shirt and had trimmed his stubble, though a few curls still fell over his forehead. I didn't expect any of this," he admitted into the mic. "I just filmed what I saw. But what I saw was a hero." His voice cracked slightly. Harris watched him, something grateful and unspoken passing through his chest. Jonah's footage had changed their lives more than any of them could have imagined. Then it was Harris's turn. He approached the podium slowly. The wind tugged lightly at his jacket. Up close, his face carried the lines of someone who had survived both war and the long aftermath of it. But tonight, his eyes were bright, steady, present. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't always kind to this dog," he began. The crowd quieted. "Truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of the chaos a dog might bring. Afraid of what I couldn't control, and afraid of the things I hadn't healed from." He paused, glancing at Rust, who watched him with unwavering attention. "But this old soldier," Harris continued, voice thickening, "rescued my grandson. Twice, and he rescued a town. But more than that, he reminded me what courage looks like. Rust didn't just save our lives, he saved the parts of ourselves we thought were gone." A hush fell across the pavilion. "So, today," Harris said, drawing in a steady breath, "I want to honor him by helping others like him. Soldiers, both human and canine, who gave everything and returned with wounds no one can see." He turned toward Lily, who smiled through teary eyes. "Tonight, I'm announcing the start of a new program, a place for veterans with PTSD, for children like my grandson Ben, and for retired K9s who still have so much to give." Harris lifted a wooden sign draped in cloth. With one pull, he revealed the name carved in clean, bold letters, Rust Haven, a sanctuary for healing, for veterans, for children, for K9 heroes. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cried openly. Others bowed their heads in quiet reverence. Later, at the newly cleared plot of land behind the Simmons home, still rough earth and scattered pine needles, Rust took his first step onto what would soon become the sanctuary grounds. His gait was steady, though slightly uneven from age. Lily walked beside him, Ben on his other side, holding tightly to Rust's fur. No leash, no commands. Just a dog who had spent his life saving others, now walking toward a place built in his honor. Rust paused once, looking around at the open space, the trees swaying gently, the family standing behind him. Then he lifted his head, breathed in the scent of pine and earth, and took another step forward, proud, calm, and utterly at peace. A soldier returning home, a healer beginning again, and a sanctuary waiting to rise around him. In the quiet glow of Rust Haven's first dawn, as sunlight slipped gently through the pines and rested on the backs of those who had once felt broken, one truth rose above every scar, every fear, and every moment of doubt. Sometimes the miracles we pray for arrive not in thunder or revelation, but in the steady footsteps of an old dog who refuses to give up on us. Rust was never just a rescue. He was a reminder that grace often comes unnoticed, wrapped in fur and loyalty, carrying the quiet courage to walk with us through the fire. And perhaps that is how God works in our everyday lives. not always with great signs, but through small mercies, unexpected companions, and moments of healing we never saw coming. If Rust's story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss another story of courage, redemption, and the quiet miracles that shape us. May God bless your home, your battles, and your healing journey, now and always.